Welcome to the 12th round of action in the Tata Steel 2021 Chess Tournament, the penultimate round. We have Anish Giri and ALIREZA FIROUZJA first and second place in the tournament facing off today. I am going to serve you 3 appetizers of games, timestamps on the video player, and then we will finish the day off with this matchup for first place. Let's just get right into it. We're going to kick things off with a game. Magnus Carlsen, the world champion with the black pieces against the number 2 player in Poland, Radoslav Wojtaszek. This one began with a Queen's Gambit, declined, and a triangle system defense, which quickly became something known as the Miran variation of the semi-Slav defense. It's a defense when black plays a triangle set up against white's Queen's Gambit with the knight on f6. Knight d7, Queen c2, development, and a very early capture on c4, trying to exploit white's already moved, like the fact that the light squared bishop has already moved, and then later maybe going for the move b5 and playing on the queen side with b5, a6, and c5. And I do think we're going to get every single one of those moves from Magnus Carlsen. There they all appear. The thing about this system is that Magnus, playing this for a win, will have to take significant risk, and Wojtaszek very early kind of traded off the knights, got a very symmetrical pawn structure. Literally, we've got this kind of 4 on the same side and 2 and 2, and he's just always a little bit more active than Magnus. And even though Magnus can play bishop e5, we have bishop b2, pieces get traded, and Wojtaszek needs to do something. As I've been saying in all of these recaps, something needs to be done. For example, if you want to make something happen in a position where it's like totally equal, you have to take risk. And if one person is risk averse, it's up to Magnus to decide. So Magnus trades his bishop, right? So now he ends up in a knight versus bishop situation, trying to look for what's called imbalance. But Wojtaszek takes and then plays rook c1, right? And then after g3, some moves later, we get a rook trade, we get a retreat, but at no point was there ever any danger. Magnus kind of transforms the position ever so slightly with this pawn now in c4, but there is nothing. I mean, he tries to infiltrate, he picks up the a3 pawn, Wojtaszek plays b5. As I said, you know, I'm going to serve you 3 appetizers before we get to the main course. This one very quick. I mean, what are you going to do? Wojtaszek doesn't come and attack Magnus, and Magnus says, okay, I mean, whatever. A quick draw. I mean, it's life. Now, maybe our second appetizer will be a little bit more tasty. This appetizer is a bit more flavorful, I promise. This is a game between NILS Grandelius and TARI, number 1 in Sweden, number 2 in Norway. So we get e4, e5, we get an Italian. Now, I know what you're thinking, Levy. It's enough Italians. I'm good. What are we in the Godfather or something? Take. We get take on d4, e5. This is normally we get a gioco piano, right? Well, now we get d4, explosive move in the center, takes, push. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, you don't always have to move your knight. In fact, e5 in many of these positions is met with d5, counterattacking the bishop. Bishop slides out to b5. Knight jumps to the middle out of danger. Bishop comes back to b6. Knight c3, black castles. White develops. Black develops a bishop. White attacks the bishop. Black slides the bishop out of danger. And now queen to c2. So what you're doing here is you're getting out of the way of the pin. You're adding pressure here and a big decision to make for black, who chooses to play bishop to a5. So now we got 2 snipers on the rooftops over here, you know, challenging the knights. White does castle, but white castles, but now takes. This is the drawback of moving the queen out of the pin, is that the pawn is the only guard, and now the king is open. And now we get this move. Knight takes d4, dynamite. What? But can't, wait a second. What if I just take this? Well, the bishop no longer controls the g5 square. So queen g5, king h1, bishop takes knight to remove the knight from ever hitting the knight in the middle, and now queen f5. Look at this move. Queen f5. So first of all, if f takes e4, it's a draw. Like I said, it's a spicier appetizer that might give you the same result. So NILS Grandelius says, why am I going to do that? Let me just move my rook out of the way, and then let me go run my king to safety. The problem is that the constant threat to the white king prevents white from ever getting any sort of stability. You're down a piece if you're playing with black here, but you're hunting down the king. Look at this move. Queen h4, allowing the knight entrance to h3 to try to go queen takes f2. So he plays bishop d2, just realizing that he can go here. If you take me like this, you know, I take your knight. And then you can take my bishop, but I'm going to stabilize. You can take one more pawn, but I'm going to stabilize. Now you bring the queen back. Now I'm going to take this pawn. Rook comes over, and a long think here for Grandelius yielded this result. He gobbled one more pawn, and then the players repeated moves. So NILS thought for a while here, and his alternative was basically playing something like rook e1, so that the queen maintains defense of the bishop. Then check, and then he would have had to play king f2. So now there's no more checks. So basically NILS has to go for this position. Black will play rook c8, hitting the queen and trying to get into c2. And NILS just has to scatter right back and try to cocoon. But he would still have an extra bishop. But NILS decides not to go for this. Potentially he didn't like something here after rook to e1. I don't know, maybe he didn't like h5. Or maybe he didn't like, the pawns coming in. I'm not sure what he didn't like, but he chooses not to. As I said, the appetizer for this game a little bit spicier, but still yielding the same result. The players just repeat moves and they make a draw. I mean, that's like I said, that's life. We might not like it, but the players don't like losing rating. No one watching this video likes to lose rating, okay? Except sandbaggers, and they get in trouble. Now, we're going to look at the last appetizer. This one going to be a little bit more fruitful. We will have a result in this game between Pentala HARIKRISHNA and Alexander Donchenko. Pentala obviously has a very solid tournament. Donchenko looking to gain a little bit of momentum. We get a queen's pawn opening and bishop to b4 on move 3 after knight f6 and e6. This is known as the Nimso Indian defense, preventing white from playing e4. So we get knight f3, classical, c5, way to hit the center, and g3. Called the Ramanishin-Kasparov system, named after two very strong players. I actually played this myself with white. And very funny here, instead of putting something in the center or taking on d4, black just jumps right in with the horse. This horse is standing in an immortal fashion in the center because of this pin. And now queen d3. Now we get cd4. Of course, if you take my knight, I will take here. So we get this. And now take, and then knight jumps back. And basically what black is saying is, haha, I've damaged your pawn structure. I'm so strong. But the counterbalance to that is now white is the only guy with the dark squared bishop. This file is open, right? So to give and take. Maybe I'm going to put my bishop on a3 from where it will live permanently on this diagonal. So let's see what happens. Queen slides over out of danger. Black goes d6. Black wants to play along the dark squares, meaning they want to, strengthen them. If they put all of their pawns on light squares now, they have weak dark squares, and they've blocked in their light squared bishop. So black needs to find this balance. So bishop g2, knight d7, white castles, black castles, and white tries to trade off the knight. White would love this, because now you open up this rook, and these pawns are not an island anymore, right? They're a nice little triangle. So of course, Donchenko plays queen c7, rook d1, knight b6, and knight takes c5. Of course, what Pentala wants is he wants dc5, because he wants Donchenko to block his queen's own vision. Donchenko isn't going to do that. Bishop e3 says, yo man, take my pawn. Take these pawns, because, if we trade the c for the d pawn, I'm so happy. I don't have any more weaknesses. But Donchenko says, no, you can hold on to those weaknesses. It's kind of funny. He doesn't take the free pawn. He wants to hold on to his d6 pawn. So now HARIKRISHNA plays the move, bishop takes b6. It's the second time this tournament. Actually, Anish Giri did the very similar thing against Wojtaszek, if you remember, transforming the position and giving Donchenko a couple of weaknesses over there with the pawns. The rest of this game, I want you to pay attention to weaknesses and piece maneuvering, combining pawn play, pawn breaks in the position with your pieces. So rook d8, a4, and then rook b1, rook b4, holding both and trying to stack the rooks to target these weaknesses. Watch, bishop c6, queen d4, hitting b, and okay, we trade. Now rook c5. So I'm going to play rook b1, hitting your b6 pawn. Very difficult for you to defend this. So you play h6. Useful move to get your king out of danger. If you take on b6, you stop guarding this. So rook c4. A little tension here. Queen slides back to d3. Looking for an opening. a5. Pawn break. Take it. I take on b7. I'm in. Now I can play queen f3, teaming up my queen with my rook. Of course, your only move in this position is rook to f8 to not get mated, frankly. But now rook b8. Normal circumstances, you can sacrifice the queen for the two rooks. But right now you need defense of this rook. So you go here. Now I come in, and I find a way to sneak into the back rank. You can make an argument here that Donchenko could have played rook to c8, but he chose king e7. He trusts that his king is safe, huddled in with the other pieces. Rook to g8, queen c6. And now e4. I don't want a queen trade. Your king is in the middle. I want my queen and rook still on the board. We get g6. Queen slides over to e3, immediately visualizing this, and maybe an infiltration over there. g5. Keep pushing your pawns. Come on, keep weakening them. Look at this pawn break. Another pawn break to weaken you. I don't want a queen trade. Queen e5, take. Rook slides over, because I want to monitor your pawn so that it doesn't go this way, and maybe my queen can come in from the other side, right? queen c5. Hey, right on cue. I've seen the game though, so we get rook a7. I don't want to trade pieces with you. And Danchenko at this point goes, bro, I got an A-pawn, man. Like, you got to deal with this, dude. So I'm about to have a second queen. So rook g5. We got queen to f6. I'm not really sure why he didn't take on c3 here. Maybe he didn't like the queen abandoning the defense of the king, so he guards his king. But now, the critical pawn break, the third pawn break to crack open Black's defenses, c5. I said pawn breaks were going to be very important. Now, the king has an infiltration spot, and perhaps the most instructive moment of this entire game, ladies and gentlemen. Feel free to pause the video, try to find White's winning maneuver. It's very nice, very geometric, very, very nice moment in this game. e5, pawn play, disconnecting the queen and opening the door for the other one to give it a slow queen b4, and the game is over. The black queen is kicked out of the action, the queen lines up, and there's nothing you can do. You stare death in the face, and there's nowhere to run. So we get queen to a8 check, but just king h2. And if you go back, I'm just gonna move out of the way so you can't check me again. If king f8, you're still on the same diagonal. So I'm gonna go double check. I'm gonna give you a discovered attack with my rook. If you play something like king to d7, I'm gonna go rook b5. And you just cannot stop me from getting in. There's nothing you can do. What happens in the game? King e8, rook b5, and now rook to b8. You could push the pawn, doesn't matter, you're gonna lose your queen and then you're gonna lose your rook because I hit the king and then both of these pieces. So we get rook b5, queen c6, and after queen to d4, hitting this and this, as Hikaru would say, the classic right triangle, the game is over. You can block with the queen if you go king to c7 or king to e7, it is mate. And actually, it turns out the king going to get a huddle with the other pieces was a big mistake because White was able to use the pawns to crack open the position, infiltrate from both sides, and win the game. So congratulations to Pentala HARIKRISHNA on a very nice victory in the penultimate round. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let us turn our attention to the main event of the evening. We have saved the best for last. Of course, how can I spoil it in the first few minutes? Anish Giri leading the tournament with 7.5 out of 11. ALIREZA FIROUZJA in the top 15 in the world now, with 7 points out of 11. Let's go. We get e4, and oh my goodness, the least expected opening of all time. ALIREZA plays e6, the French defense. Now we get El Clásico, knight c, and I'm not talking Barcelona versus Real Madrid. So knight c3 defends the pawn. We get knight to f6. ALIREZA, by the way, might have played the French because Anish has a course on it. I don't know. Mind games. e5, knight d7, White plays f4, Black attacks the center with the move c5. White solidifies the center, Black attacks the center again, White plays bishop e3, solidifying the center again. This is a mainline Steinitz, named after Wilhelm Steinitz. Bishop to e3, a6, and some expansion is possible on this side of the board. A3 played by White, and now a transformation in bishop c5. A short while later, Anish Giri made a decision to not allow ALIREZA to casually develop, and rather play the move knight c6, queen c6, and b4. Do something with your bishop, ALIREZA. Take, and now he volunteers the opening of this diagonal. d4 plays ALIREZA, and it looks like you're just busted here because of all these threats, but a nice move here, queen e4. A very nice move. Counter shot of mate, so the queens come off, bishop d5, and a short while later, we get this position. We got 2 rooks, a bishop, and 7 pawns apiece. Let's roll. Basically, what Anish Giri is trying to say is, hey, ALIREZA, you have a very obvious weakness. I do not have a very obvious weakness. You can argue my c2 pawn is weak, but the bishop is always defending it. So now ALIREZA is going to try to use his knight in a counter-attacking fashion and offset the fact that his d4 pawn is a liability, not to mention the pawns on the queen side. ALIREZA jumps in, gives away his a6 pawn, and solidifies the knight on c3 with the d pawn holding b5. But now we have a 2-on-1 situation which could be problematic. The bishop tries to come back, the knight checks, and Giri gives away the pawn on f4 and plays a quiet move. ALIREZA here tries to get rid of this pawn, liquidate it, you know? But Anish says, nah, I'm good. You can come and attack it. I'm gonna come with king e3. You take. Do you see what Anish Giri is focusing on? He wants the b5 pawn. That is what he wants. He is investing in the queen side majority of this game, right? He doesn't care about the fact that pieces are getting traded. He wants a 2-on-1. So Anish finds a way to get exactly that. ALIREZA, meanwhile, is struggling to defend the position. We're on move 35, so low time is a thing, right? We're trying to make the time control. Let's make it to move 40, get that extra time, and here we are. We have now reached the 41st move of the game. White is still with the advantage. Anish walks his king right up to the knight. The knight can't go anywhere. If the knight goes back to b6, you take b5. A 2-on-0 will probably win you the game. So let's see what happens. Rook slides over to f2, e5, and rather than even going like bishop takes b5, rook takes b5, and king takes a4, even though you're going to win the 2 pawns here, Anish doesn't like this. He doesn't like the fact that the king is so close. The activity of black's king combined with the passed e-pawn gives black sufficient compensation, right? Because the white king is very passive on the side of the board with these 2 pawns in the way of the 2 pawns, but this pawn is just coming. Like, who's going to stop this pawn, right? So rather than doing this, Anish stays patient, infiltrating with the rook, wins the pawn the right way, and has a completely winning position. ALIREZA FIROUZJA now on the verge of defeat just says, well, man, I gotta activate my knight, and I gotta push my pawn. I'm down 2 pawns, so I just gotta push my e-pawn. This is the only thing that I have, so let's see. Rook f7 coming back, now the pawn pushes once again. Now we get rook back to f1, knight c3, a clutch move. The king holds both, knight covers the check, knight covers the pawn, knight hits the bishop. Anish thinking, plays rook f4 check, king slides back, and rook slides over to f3. But now, knight takes b5, and rook takes e3 check. If this had happened, if he had taken this back, the king comes and we have the same problem. So this is a bad endgame for Anish, despite the extra pawns, because again, in the endgame, you need material, but you need piece activity. And his piece activity here is dreadful. So Anish turns this into a rook and 4 versus rook and knight. I've never seen an endgame like this, honestly. This is the craziest game I might have ever seen. Like, honestly, I've never seen this. AB, look at how together his pawns are. By the way, can we just address the fact that it's the 54th move of the game and the G and H pawns haven't moved? Like, what bums, man? Like, what are you doing? Everybody else showed up to the job. What are you guys? Are you guys asleep? Forgot to set your alarms? So knight e4, a5, they still haven't moved. King d5, a6. Dude, move the other pawns. You know what's funny? In this position, the winning move for white was h4. Just winning on the spot, because you need to push on both sides. And Anish, like, could have played h4, and the point is, like, for example, what does black do? If black gives you a check, because you cannot take because of the pin, you just move out of the way. The knight can come back, but you play h5. So Anish has to find the right moment to push on both sides of the board. Anish chooses to push the a-pawn. I mean, why not? It's the furthest advance, right? But now knight c5 check, and knight d3! Hitting the b4 pawn. If you play a7 here, which is what happens in the game, it looks like you're making the rook be very passive. But the problem is, ALIREZA can go here. And you say, what is so special about that move? Now Anish just plays the h-pawn. Now there's knight f4. The knight is geometrically in time to prevent advancement, and this one move buys time. Anish Giri has to move his king. If the pawns here are stopped, it's time to march the king up and push the b-pawn. But Anish focuses on this advancement, and this gives ALIREZA knight e6 with a tempo. And when the rook moves, knight c7, interposing, getting in the way. And that pawn that you marched there to kill the activity now backfires, because you're going to lose it. Again, the big difference here, if knight f4 had been played and king a4, you can play this knight e6 maneuver hoping for the same thing, but I have b5, and I don't need to move my rook. And when you come closer, I have rook g6. This is the big difference, and it looks like I'm winning the knight, but that's not even the point. The point is that you are paralyzed, and I can go here, here, and h6, and I just get that pawn far enough, and now you're still a game that white has to work hard to win, but that is the point. I buy myself time, and the big difference with what happens in the game is both pawns get pushed, but not far enough. They're not far enough. One pawn had to go, but not too far, as we saw on this side. That's why endgames are so brutal, and ALIREZA FIROUZJA gets his defenses right. Rook h7 played if you take, I just promote rook g8, and the players agree to a draw. Why? Let's say white just says, no, it's not a draw. I'm gonna go knight f4. White says, no, 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 I'm gonna keep pushing. I'm gonna take. And that is why you need to be good at rook endgames. You transform, you sack the knight for the 2 pawns, the 1 pawn remaining is not enough to win. This is just a drawn rook endgame, combining all of this knowledge at the end. ALIREZA FIROUZJA, a monumental defensive task, holds Anish Giri. And yes, okay, everyone's gonna, Anish draws. Stop it. Stop. This is not the time for memes. You know what we need in this game? Credit where credit is due. ALIREZA FIROUZJA survives a 6-hour nightmare versus Anish Giri. Almost over 6, like, it was almost 7 hours he survived this endgame. It was, how many moves at the end? Over nearly 70 move game. And he draws, and he holds. Wow. And ladies and gentlemen, we end the 12th round. Truth is, right where we started it. It's still a half-point race between 4 players. Anish Giri, Jordan van Foreest, ALIREZA FIROUZJA, and Fabiano Caruana. Tomorrow, we will determine the winner of the 2021 edition of the Tata Steel Chess Championship.